Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Maxim Isaac, Member Services Manager at the Charles River Regional Chamber, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Introduction to Neurodiversity in the Workplace, and it's going to be presented by Jack Lewis from MGH Aspire. Before we begin, I'd like to give a shout out to our sponsors, Direct Federal In-Source Services, UMass Amherst, NBCU Boston, and William James College. Without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to you, Jack. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Max. I'm very excited to be here, and thank you all for being here so far. Just want to open it up by saying if there are questions that people do have as we're talking today, feel free to pop off mute or ask them in the chat. I'm going to ask that Maxim lets me know if there are any questions that do arise in case I don't see them in the chat feature. And I will be sharing a PDF version of our slides afterwards to Maxim that can be either posted or sent out. So don't feel as if you have to take intake notes and intense notes throughout the entire process today. So I will share my screen. Just give me 1 second. All right, can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Maxim. So as Maxim mentioned, we're going to be talking about neurodiversity in the workplace. My name is Jack Lewis. I'm the Associate Manager of Employment Services here at MGH Aspire. Want to start off by talking a little bit more about Aspire itself. So we're a program out of the Lurie Center for Autism in Lexington. We've been around since the early 90s. It started with a camp in Charlestown, and we have programs that start all the way from child through adult life. So we are helping children, teens, and adults with ASD achieve success within multiple contexts of life. So this is a little bit more about the programs that we do support really for neurodiversity. So we do neurodiversity trainings, local CPAC fairs at schools, school fairs. I'm actually over at Bridgewater State right now. I'm doing a Be Seen fair for disability and inclusion after this. We do it at nonprofits. In the employer base, we do corporate consultation where managers and employers can get coaching. And when an individual does disclose within the workplace that they might have a disability or a diagnosis, they can get support, and we provide support to them with consultation and coaching for the employer and the manager. In schools, we do school consultation where we support the teacher, support students, do professional development opportunities. And then from the family side, we offer parent coaching and support groups for those looking for assistance in how to support neurodivergent individuals. A little bit more about Aspire services across the lifespan. So we have child, teen, and adult programs, as mentioned. We really pride ourselves in finding well-matched peer groups. So we never want to accept someone into our program that's not a good fit. We want to make sure that those individuals that need support get it, but making sure that they have someone that they can relate to and have conversations with and work with that makes them feel most comfortable and supported within their environment. So as mentioned, we have summer programming. So we actually have a camp that's run out of Westwood, Massachusetts. We have relationship groups, after school programs, social groups itself, college, career, and relationship coaching. Our Aspire Works Employment Internship Program, which is the program that I run, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. Supportive employment for neurodiverse employees. So we really want to make sure that those all the way from child through adult life are getting the support that they need. I want to talk a little bit more about this 3S model on the left here. So you can see social competency, right? That's the first of the 3 S's I want to dive into a little bit more. Knowing that social competency is needed for life, depending on the context that you're in. It is involved in some way in every workplace, but helping individuals understand their social strengths, the challenges they may have, putting supports in place for small talk and how to handle small talk situations within the workplace, developing their social thinking skills and social skills overall, and really how to apply this across many contexts of their life and relationships, especially when working with supervisors or having conversations in the lunchroom. We really want to make sure that they're having positive relationships being formed and working with team members and colleagues. The second 3S I'm going to talk about is stress management. I'm sure everyone here deals with some sort of stress in their life. Stress is nor good or bad. I like to think of an athlete sometimes in this conversation that to be at your peak performance, you kind of have to be at a moderate level of stress. If it's at a heightened level, it's hard to kind of manage that. Or if it's at a low level, you're not as excited or enthusiastic. So I think stress is never a bad thing. It's how to manage those stress emotions and making sure that you are having conversations and making sure that you're feeling supported in there. We want to make sure that we're linking thoughts, feelings, and behaviors together and putting coping strategies in place, such as taking breaks, meditation, deep breathing, and putting those systems in place within the workplace so that they can have a chance to decompress. I know for myself, I take a walk every single day if I can at lunchtime for about 30 minutes instead of taking lunch at that point, really so I can get out, remove myself from my computer screen, and that helps me really decompress when coming back into a meeting. The last of the three S's I'll talk about is self-awareness. So at the beginning of my internship program specifically, we do assessments for all of our individuals to learn about their goals, the strengths that they have, challenges, to understand where they may need more support within the workplace. It's important to us to have a better idea of where they're at and what goals they have to assist them in figuring out their next steps in employment. I want to dive into what is neurodiversity, right? So neurodiversity is an umbrella term which encompasses a wide range of neurological conditions on how individuals think, they learn, and they interact within the world. This term includes ASD or autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, dyslexia, and the list goes on, as you can see here on the screen. When we think about neurodiversity in the workplace, we want to value individuals' differences in how they process information. They use language, they learn and think differently, and how to apply their strengths in the workplace and put strategies in place to minimize on those challenges. That's really where I come into play a lot of times. I have consultation with the employer, coaching with with the employee itself, really making sure from a wraparound perspective, they're feeling supported and have the strategies to assist in having the best experience overall. And actually, a fact came out, I think, 2 days ago, that autism rates have risen 1 in 31 children in the US when diagnosed. So that's a new fact that I think that came out 2 days ago. Talking about a problem statement. So studies have found that individuals with autism really have the lowest pay within the workplace. So in the US, 42 to 47% of autistic adults are unemployed, right? So this could really be due to high cost of families, lack of workplace support and understanding, workplace accommodations that are lacking. It's really shocking and unfortunate because those individuals have a competitive advantage that we want employers to really see and see as a benefit to them. So that's really why we're doing a lot of these trainings and conversations with employers so that they know that the assets that these individuals do bring to the workplace. So just some shocking numbers. I know they're outdated on this here, something that I'm working on with our manager team to figure out if there are updated numbers we can get, and that's something I can work on here. Really like to share this graphic. So it's funny because you can see for a fair selection, everybody take that same exam, climb that tree. So we have a monkey, penguin, elephant, fish, the list goes on, and everyone's having to take that exam. If we think about interviewing, let's say for a second, there's some sort of social exam where a candidate has to meet an expectation of that workplace. So we want to really illustrate that there are different ways of giving accommodations or modifications for individuals to get access to what they need in the workplace. So let's say it's giving questions ahead of time to best prepare so they're not as anxious going into the conversation or interview, keeping their camera off, doing a phone call instead of a Zoom interview or an in-person interview. Really just certain little accommodations or modifications to make sure that barrier is not necessarily there. So employers can make sure that someone is comfortable in gaining access to the curriculum or the interview structure that makes them feel most comfortable. So talked about neurodiversity as a competitive advantage. So this is just a small list of companies that Aspire does partner with in the intellectual movement. We do have a bigger list of 60 plus employer partners that we do work with in the Boston and New England area. We offer consultation to these employers. So someone may disclose within the workplace and then they pull an Aspire and we have a conversation with the employer. We have a conversation with the employee itself to make sure that they are feeling supported, but also getting certain strategies put in place or accommodations that they find necessary, really kind of using the ADA once they do disclose, which is something I'll talk about in the next slide, really to make sure that we are compliant to make sure that they get the support they need. So the case for neurodiversity, I'll dive into ADA compliance first. So this requires support in recruitment, hiring, retention of employees with disabilities. So it's really making sure that there's no discrimination or equal employee opportunities for all. There also are reasonable accommodations in the workplace to support employees. That could be altering the interview structure, as I mentioned. It could be having separate seating or areas where they feel most supported, but also have a space that they can have sensory experiences. Disclosure and confidentiality. So we want to protect the information that others may not have known otherwise. We're not going to really dive into disclosure today, but it is something that is a difficult conversation because we can't disclose for an employee. It's up to them because it's their own personal information. But if they do disclose, that's when the ADA comes into play, and we want to make sure that they are being respected and having the opportunities that help them feel most supported. Representation in the population and why this matters. So I'll give some kind of numbers here. About 15 to 20% of the global population is neurodivergent. ADHD affects around 5 to 7%. Autism affects around 1 to 2%. Dyslexia impacts roughly 10%. And 18% of the population is diagnosed with anxiety disorder. So some pretty big numbers there that may come across as shocking for some individuals, but it is something with testing and neuropsychs that's becoming more normalized nowadays. I think back, 20, 30 years ago, the testing was not as intense and knowing how to support these individuals, but it has gotten better over the years. If we think about competitive advantage, increase creativity and innovation within the workplace. So there's different problem solving approaches that neurodivergent individuals bring. What is a way of thinking differently? They may have a heightened focus on a certain area, having better decision making when it comes to making well-rounded decisions, improved performance with complex problems, enhanced adaptability and flexibility to changing the environments or the challenges they're faced with. So it's just a really different way of thinking that these individuals do bring. And on the next slide, we'll talk about kind of the strengths of autism and how to reframe that when the things that we see as negative. And lastly, staffing solution crisis. So this expands the staffing pool and talent pool for individuals for that have unique strengths such as attention to detail, creativity, and problem solving. Increased retention for neurodiverse employees or friendlies that boost inclusivity, improving employee satisfaction and reducing turnover, really adapting and really individual strengths that they bring to the workplace. Really, it enhances their flexibility and versatility in their staffing. And lastly, it's going to save cost, right? So proper accommodations and absenteeism will increase, the job satisfaction and lower recruitment, right? So keeping those individuals on rather than just that constant turnover rate that you may see when you're working with individuals. So thinking about the case for neurodiversity, we want to see this as a well-rounded perspective, making sure that they are being supported from ADA, representation to make sure that they are getting the work and necessary skills that they need to be successful in the workplace, seeing it as a competitive advantage, but also working through staffing. So this slide's fun just because it talks about the things that you have to have for ASD. So must have 3 of the following. So social communication challenges, it could be, insistence on sameness, deficits in developing or maintaining, relationships, deficits in nonverbal social communication. When people see this, they probably would see it as a negative when working in the workplace. But what if we think about reframing it and the strengths that people have? So people that are neurodivergent have a sense of workplace loyalty. They have clear, honest feedback, heightened perceptual abilities, strength with repetition, strengths with protocols and procedures. Those things that we might see as a negative, really reframing them and seeing them as a positive and what these individuals do bring to the workplace. It's something that would help to make sure that the talent pool, but also the managers know that they have someone that's going to be loyal to them and does really well with those repetition tasks, having certain procedures put in place. They're going to follow it by the book. I want to talk about the internship programs. This is the program that I run here at Aspire. So what I do is I have an applicant that applies to us. We work out of the Lurie Center for Autism, as I mentioned earlier. And, a doctor may refer them, or a school may refer someone, or someone goes through our pipeline from child all the way through up to adult work. And I do an intake with them to learn more about their strengths, challenges, what goals they have related to the workplace. And then I go and collect a resume from them. So I work with them to find out, if it's kind of market ready from the resume perspective. If it's not, I make edits with them to make sure it is market ready. I then de-identify that resume and share with employer partners that I feel could be good fits based off of the work that they have available or a job description. I didn't mention this, but our internship programs are 10 weeks long. So we offer academic year programming. So we do a fall internship, a spring internship, and then also summer internships, as well as rolling internships. And I reach out to employer partners in the Boston and New England area that we have worked with or have relationships with and share that de-identified resume just in case there is a nepotism policy or if there's a relationship with someone else or someone applied recently, so they can see their previous work experience or the skill sets that they have and some notes from our intake. Then they reach back out to me and say, yes, Jack, this resume looks like a really good fit for the work we're looking to have done, or we have a potential fit for an internship opportunity this summer. That's when I pull in the intern. So I would then introduce the intern and support them. We would set up an interview. Before that interview even happens, I do mock interview work with all of our individuals. So that could be going through the company website and learning about them a little bit more so they feel they've done the research on the company, coming up with questions and answers they want to ask or have comfortable answering, giving mock interview feedback, just making sure they feel more confident going into the interview. And then I also support them on the interview itself. So my role throughout a lot of interviews is to kind of be a fly on the wall. So I'm there taking notes, offering feedback afterwards to the interviewee, making sure that if there are clarifications on my role throughout the internship or support that I can provide or little reminders for the interviewer, really just making sure they feel and have a comforting face there. After the interview, it just like any other employment opportunity, sometimes we know if it's going to move forward ahead of time, but they have the choice to say yes or no. So from the employer side, they can say, Jack, we'd like to move forward with this candidate. We're going to offer them the internship. If they do, the intern has the choice to say yes or no. If it doesn't feel like a good fit from their perspective, they can say, hey, Jack, this doesn't feel like the right fit. Then we kind of go back to the drawing board from other opportunities that we're discussing. If they do want to move forward, I help them with all of the onboarding tasks. So specific for the company, whatever their typical onboarding process is, I'm there from an executive functioning standpoint to support them, make sure they're feeling comfortable and kind of getting things done so it's a smooth sailing process. And then after they are onboarded and have their start date, that's when I set up a weekly career coaching session with them. So my role is to make sure that I have a weekly check-in with them. I'm not on site with individuals. If they are working an in-person internship, I usually go for the first day for a couple of hours in case there are sensory experiences or things that we need to modify, just to make sure they feel comfortable and have someone there that they can come and talk to. And then once they are on board and everything, I have that weekly check-in with them from a virtual environment where we're discussing the pace of the work, any challenges they're having, communication deficits or any challenges there. Also talking about the strengths that they're noticing in the work that they're doing and putting strategies in place in case they do need a little bit more support. On the flip side, I also work with the manager and consult with them weekly. So I have a chance to check in with them and see how things are going from their perspective. So sometimes the intern may say everything's going great, I'm having no issues. And then the manager and I meet and they say, oh, we're having some challenges with X, Y, and Z. What support can you provide to us or what things can you help us know a little bit more about this individual? That's where I come in as the middleman to support from both sides. All managers or employer partners that we work with get a neurodiversity in the workplace training, something similar to what we're doing today ahead of time to best prepare and make sure they feel comfortable. As I mentioned, I can't disclose for our individuals. So I want to make sure that they have an understanding of what neurodiversity is, talk about best practices or handle situations within the workplace, and really just making sure that they feel a little bit more comfortable supporting a neurodivergent individual. So I do that weekly coaching for the individual and the manager. I also have a weekly seminar that I run for all new interns that join our program. So my background's in special education. I was in schools before this, and I do a little bit of teaching once a week for 60 minutes on Zoom with all interns that I support within the cycle. And we discuss areas like self-advocacy and disclosure in the workplace, small talk, networking, executive functioning, about 10 weeks of seminars that I run that enhances their performance day to day and afterwards. After the internships have concluded, I do a written summary and report with feedback from myself, feedback from the manager, really kind of a transition plan to figure out what their next steps are. Sometimes internships could extend longer and have an opportunity for permanent work. It's not something that we can guarantee or match for our individuals. It is short-term kind of exposure within the workplace. But if someone does have a goal of finding long-term work, in those weekly career coaching sessions, that's something that we can really achieve and work on, and applying to jobs together, doing interview prep, really just making sure that we're assisting them in their next steps to employment. Want to go to best practices. So this is kind of the meat and potatoes of what we'll talk about today. So this is probably what most people want to see, but things that you could see within the workplace. And this is not specific to every individual I work with. It could be, and it just kind of helps knowing what to do in the situation. So if you see signs of anxiety, such as foot tapping, sweating, talking a lot, providing structure is really important. So having a really concrete schedule, having a point of contact that they know they can go to, clarifying when the intern can communicate with that point of contact. So not interrupting them during a meeting, if it's best to text them or message them on Teams, really just figuring out and having those structures put in place. You may see someone talking too much in meetings or even too little sometimes in group discussions, providing feedback and suggestions on those communication expectations. So let's say in this meeting, each person can share 3 to 4 thoughts on the project that we're working on. And then afterwards, we'll just take notes, right? Or asking in the chat feature. Keeping a notebook is really important, just in case there are questions that they have, or if someone's not available during a time to answer a question, they can jot that note down so it doesn't go away afterwards. Inform them when those questions can be asked, either in the chat feature or at the end of a meeting, or if you're able to pause and answer your question or raise your hand, just really just kind of putting those structures in place. So you might see little
Jack,
oh,
sorry, there was one question. Someone said paid or unpaid internships. I think
yeah.
they were talking about your previous slide.
Definitely. Yeah, thanks for chiming in, Maximum. So we do have paid and unpaid internships. And during my intake process, as I mentioned, I ask a question and ask, are you open to paid versus unpaid? And if they're only looking for paid work, I only look to paid opportunities that I have support and employment partners with. If they're open to both, that opens up a lot more opportunities that I can look to with our employer partners. So it really is dependent on the individual and the company. Great question. So you may see misunderstood inferences or sarcasm, and seeing individuals may not understand those things or may make a face saying it didn't really make sense to me. So really being mindful when using metaphors and check in to see if they didn't understand that. So if you notice that they didn't laugh or notice those things, you can just kind of avoid sarcasm or say, this is what I meant by that, just kind of further explanation. You may see repetitive questions asked. So providing information in writing as well as that verbal confirmation is important. So keeping that notebook again to write down the possible information, having a running log in the chat where they can search and find those things again, providing positive feedback to assure that they're doing a good job. We all need that kind of positive motivation within the workplace, saying that we're doing a good job, asking good questions. So kind of that positive reinforcement helps them understand that they're doing a really good job in the workplace. I see a chat coming through as well. Yeah, great question about the central Mass or have to be in the Boston area. So I have individuals all over the Massachusetts area, but also in New Hampshire and other areas. COVID has allowed us many opportunities to find work outside of our typical Boston area work environments. So it could be virtual work, it could be areas. I've supported individuals in California, Arizona, Tennessee, in finding opportunities. So it can be outside of the area and we can search for opportunities. That's more kind of the career coaching route with our employer partners that we do support. It's mostly in the Boston, New England area, but there are opportunities in different parts of Massachusetts. I'm in the Worcester area, even New Hampshire and the Seacoast area. So it can be outside of those areas. So you may see increased stress when there's an unplanned change, right? All of us, when there's something changed or something switched on us last minute, can be hard to deal with. But being empathetic during those conversations with the tone and the language that you're using, maybe giving them 3 to 5 minutes to reset, just kind of take a break and then come back and work on that new task that's given to them, or sometimes even a longer break may be necessary. So just kind of when there is an unplanned change, giving as much time to get comfortable and talk through it as possible. And the last slide on best practices. So, you may see initiating tasks or shifting between tasks could be difficult. So establishing long and short-term goals for an employee, assisting them in assigning priority. So let's say they're given 5 tasks this week they're supposed to work on. really assigning them saying this is number one all the way through five, and maybe some sub bullets on things that could help them check off that list as they go, making sure it's systematic and predictable so that they know exactly what's to be expected. Some individuals do well with deadlines, and some may have a little bit tougher times with that. So if they are given a specific deadline, having kind of those sub bullets or those concrete tasks so they know they're getting along the steps is very helpful. Someone may not recognize how long a task takes, right? So breaking them down into multiple steps within a project, maybe estimating, I expect this to take this long, more data collection, because that can help you as a manager know, okay, this task took a little bit longer than I expected to. This helps me reframe the work that we're going to do next week. Just really just kind of some data collection. And then behaviors outside of the workplace norms. So attire concerns, discussing taboo topics, being direct, but also empathetic in your feedback. There may be a corrective solution saying that's not appropriate. If it is something that you're struggling with over and over again, you can consult with the career coach, such as myself, or just ask the question and, say, this is something we're noticing over and over again. Have you noticed this with him or her before? What suggestions do you have that we can talk about to help them? That's where I can really dive in and be that middleman to support from both sides. Want to go into core concepts. So the first of the core concepts that we're going to discuss today is executive functioning. When we think about executive functioning, I like to think about, starting our day all the way to the end or even bedtime, right? So how we effectively plan, prioritize our day, sustain our efforts towards tasks and goals helps us from doing one thing all the way to actually doing it. So the brain has executive functions such as activation, how we organize and prioritize our tasks, focus, how we sustain focus on our tasks or shift attention from one task to another, emotions, how we manage and modulate our emotions, and many others. So we're going to discuss some tools today on how to support in executive functioning skills. So this is a nice kind of breakdown when working with a supervisor to kind of have a task list and how to manage those tasks. So it could be taking time and making decisions on which tasks to start with and when. So you can see that with, individuals who are neurodivergent at times, it could be paralyzing if you look at a task and there's no assignment for which one to start with, right? You have a list of tasks, you don't know where to begin. This slide is a proposed structure on how to help employees manage time, but also prioritize their tasks to help them know which ones to begin with and when. So maybe in supervision with an employee, you could ask them to look at their task list together and have a conversation about the high tasks, the medium tasks, and the low priority tasks, and help them look at their schedule and when to target that task or what to do to make sure that they are achieving those tasks by a certain time frame. The second part of the visual is to help them manage that task list and move through what they're already working on and do a column from, to do, doing, done. And sometimes it could be blocked or there's barriers, right? So maybe you've checked that task off, but the fourth one blocked, you may have to have a conversation with the employer or manager to collaborate with the employee on when addressing those barriers or getting in the way of completing the task. What things are you having challenges with? And that's when those strategies can be put in place with the manager to say, these are things that we need to do, or these are some, graphics we could look at or resources to look at together and how to achieve that tasks. So I really like this task, especially when you're seeing it in supervision with the manager to help them, manage their tasks and time management. The second area we're going to talk about is social communication. And we talked about this earlier in the beginning with the 3S's, but some workplaces have more and some places have less. So some helpful strategies that I recommend when breaking down and teaching team and organizational expectations are the following, right? So I'm sure that individuals either in their home life or in work have seen similar pictures to this, depending on where they're at. But there are social norms that are expected in every office or workplace environment. So really being explicit about the social expectations for a shared space. So if possible, making these expectations visual to better understand, being willing to reconsider or be flexible on some of those based off the individuals that you do work with. Each person does have differences. So really just being as concrete and understanding as possible, really making them visual, but also concrete. Feedback. So whenever we're giving feedback to employees, especially neurodivergent employees, we want to aim to be concrete, specific, and direct. If there is some behavior that you want the employee to work on or change, we want to have explicitly stated to them that this is the behavior that we're working on, be very clear, specific, direct, And then a lot of times feedback doesn't explicitly state what we want them to change. And that's something to talk about very explicitly in supervision and have those concrete steps and what to include. It is helpful to talk through this kind of clarity with an employee, and or else they're pretty much left confused and unsure about what to do to change that expectation. So having an action item put in place for them to work on. It also lacks, a lot of structure. So this is the feedback. I think this means this, so I should do this, right? So having this kind of graphic put in supervision really helps them work on that behavior, but also work through any challenges they're having. I really like this next graphic about supervision structures. So social communication can be anxiety provoking when it comes to working with your supervisor or having a one-to-one meeting with your supervisor. Having a consistent agenda so individuals know what to expect is crucial, right? Making sure both parties do contribute to that agenda in advance, so that way they know what's discussed, they can capture the conversation, they can take notes in a visual structure in addition to verbal confirmation. Reviewing the notes to allow for full understanding is really important, and then checking in with when necessary if there is confusion. So it's a really great place to say, okay, this is our agenda. Let's both contribute to it. This is the conversation we had. Are there any questions that you have from this conversation? That way you can address it in that moment and know where to go moving forward for your next meeting. So collaboration culture. One of the best ways that you can build culture in the workplace is normalizing communication differences in the workplace. Each individual can disclose their strengths, their unique challenges in the workplace. Each person does have their own strengths and challenges, and it's really making sure that if they have a documented disability, we have a chance to make sure that they can work through this in the workplace, help to normalize that communication expectation without having it come from that diagnosis. So if you allow for a space for someone to come to and ask a question or share, I'm having challenges with this, not necessarily going to that diagnosis or that disclosure of a conversation, just works and helps as a manager to make sure that you're helping each individual achieve success within the workplace. It's really inviting communication with the team and helps them share their strengths and challenges, but also makes them more aware and accepting of the team and understands their own strengths and challenges and have some self-awareness in the workplace. The third area we're going to talk about is emotional regulation. So these are some best practices to help with emotional regulation skills in the workplace. So for managers to understand various causes of anxiety for neurodivergent employees, because there are worsened anxiety issues that individuals can have in relation to neurotypical employees. These will help you better understand what can cause anxiety and what can empower you to come up with solutions to perform at their optimal level, right? So first, for example, when there are sudden changes in routine, as we talked about, or unexpected changes, this can cause anxiety for many, if not all of employees, but it can contribute to significant increase for anxiety for neurodiverse employees and can interfere with their performance at work, right? Vague and indirect feedback. I know it's vague and indirect, and when using clear feedback, it can be helpful when communicating with a colleague or employee that you're supervising. Try avoid using metaphors, sensory stimulation. So if you're working in a hybrid work environment and they're coming back to work, it's less likely that they have their own space. So having a shared space environment, such as using noise canceling headphones, making sure that they have a space they can go to if they need a little bit more privacy. Maybe there's an unstructured social situation. So everyone here that may work in a shared workspace, there's usually a place to congregate, eat, drink coffee, or have conversations. Those kinds of unstructured social situations, when there's less predictability and structure for communication, can cause neurodiverse employees to feel a little bit more anxious. So providing as much structure as we talked about, having a space they can go to where they can really sit down and have a break away from everyone, that's really important to make them feel valued and comfortable in the workplace. And I'm seeing a chat feature here. Yeah, so Rachel asks, can you please provide additional examples of social expectations and how to represent them visually? That's something I might follow up on, Rachel, after this with a graphic. I do have a graphic in a different PowerPoint that I can share and give to Maxime afterwards. So I think I'll follow up on that if we can talk later on that. That's helpful. Thank you. So breaks. I talked about this earlier, that breaks are important for everyone's day. We can't be productive 8 hours straight. That's not physically possible, I would say. So I'm on a lot of Zoom meetings throughout my day. After a Zoom meeting, I may get up and walk around for 4 to 5 minutes. So short breaks can alleviate stress or anxiety and improve someone's attention span. So those brief 2 to 3 minute breaks or brevity breaks during an individual or group meeting, when there's a lot of information to process or consume, can really help the more kind of stimuli increase and help them feel more productive in that work environment. When there's a heightened kind of sensory experience or social expectation on them, structure opportunities for individuals to step away and decompress or recharge, that kind of 10 to 15-minute break. Sometimes it is necessary, sometimes it may not be possible. So I think sharing that upfront and honest, saying this is going to be a long meeting. If you need to take a break at any point, this is the best time to do it. That way they can kind of preview and expect that. Productive breaks, right? So these are some tools and strategies we typically offer or mention to employees that they can work with. So having a calming space to use during the workday in their home or in the office environment, maybe meditation, right? Deep breathing, support person conversations or a mentor to go to, music. I know if I'm in a meeting or if I'm doing reports, let's say, I may use my AirPods and listen to music that helps me focus a little bit more, taking a break or walking. There's so many different strategies that we can incorporate within the workplace that are not, disrupting performance overall. This is to increase performance. And then the last concept I'm going to talk about is sensory processing. So being aware of sensory experiences in the workplace, such as lighting, sounds, temperature. I'm at Bridgewater State right now for a fair, and there's construction going on outside, so it's been very distracting on my end. So being aware of that for psychological safety and productivity for employees. So when thinking about individual sensories, it's important to note that a person's neurodiversity involves differences with their sensory and perceptual differences and experiences. So sensory experiences can be distressing and overstimulating, leading that person to avoid a situation that may trigger them. Sensory experiences can also be joyful, right? So leading them to want to sense out and pleasure and have that experience more often. It's important to note that, stated here, sharing strengths or areas of challenge with your managers or supervisor, this will allow them to be best optimized in the workplace and be supported, right? So I think biggest takeaway is having the conversation and making individuals feel comfortable to disclose and have these conversations open and honestly, making sure that they can feel the most comfortable in that culture. Consider the environment. So we talked about this, difficulty with noises, bright lights, intense smells. So maybe having a space they can go away to, right? So a separate workspace. I know my office has no windows when I'm at the office. So I might go into a classroom that has a window if I need a little bit more brightness or a place to wake me up. Really avoiding sensory experiences with the HVAC machines, working with the employee themselves to brainstorm strategies that's going to help accommodate or modify the experiences, such as a remote work schedule, maybe noise canceling headphones, a space they can take a break, just little accommodations or modifications that are not super disruptful to the workplace. So I want to talk about next steps in your allyship, right? So you could identify one of the team components, expectations, or schedule, prepare and preview that event with, or the sequence of events with that employee. Maybe identify 3 routines used by your team, write a process for those routines so that you can kind of see step by step. Identify a task that requires an individual to listen and digest lengthy oral instructions, having a visual guide and put in place. Identify a common workplace social situation, maybe articulate that social expectation and why it's important to that workplace or productivity. And then lastly, identify an unwritten rule or that hidden curriculum within the workplace. Prepare some explicit teaching on how you would help a colleague understand this expectation and why it matters. So that's the presentation for today. There are a lot of programs, as I mentioned, that Aspire does offer. Our internship program is mentioned. We're always looking for new employer partners that we support. And I have a graphic that I'm going to share afterwards with Maxime that he can send out that talks about kind of the internship program and what expectations look like. But if you are interested in learning more about Aspire, you can go to our website, join our mailing list, look at our social media pages. We just had our gala last week, so a new gala video is going to be posted hopefully this week as well. So I will take down my screen so I can see everyone here that might have questions. And I know a question just popped into the chat, so let me look at that first. Yeah, so Julie asked, what types of positions or internships do the employers you work with typically hire for? It's a wide range, right? So I start all the way, maybe let's say at volunteering at an animal shelter locally, all the way to working at Liberty Mutual or Fidelity. right? So it could be a wide range. And I use the strengths and areas from my intake process with our individuals to learn what their goals are or sorts of companies that they're hoping to get involved with, and then go to my drawing board to see what there is. So it could be local animal shelters, doing coding or technology in the workplace. It could be, doing graphic design. It is a wide variety, just to make it clear and simple. And then Kai wrote, a quick thought to add, if I may, regarding the provision of feedback and supervision meetings. When providing feedback regarding behavior modification, it's important to come from a curious place and be mindful of whether the feedback is being provided is asking them to minimize their neurodivergent existence for the comfort of others, making it important to learn from the neurodivergent person's worldview and collaborative conversation, so we are not promoting masking. Great point, Kai. Yeah, so masking is a big conversation that's had in the workplace, and something that we want to empower individuals the necessarily feeling not to mask in the workplace, and them to be their true authentic selves. Eliza asked if internships can be part-time or do they have to be full-time? Very flexible on that. So internships can be volunteer, they can be part-time, full-time, per diem type of work. As I mentioned, we support for a 10-week internship program, and that's also flexible. Some individuals I work with can only work for 8 weeks during the summer, let's say, or they may have, a long-term internship that they're trying to get through school. Oh, yes. Shelly, what I'll do is I'll just share that screen again, and I'm going to share the slides if you were not here at the beginning afterwards in PDF version, so you can see everything that we've discussed today. So let me just pull up that last slide again for you, just so that people can have that up, and I'll put it up so people can see. I'll leave that up for now. Yeah, so unpaid work needs to be carefully navigated, lots of regulations. Yeah, that's a great point. I know, like in the hospital, we're a part of Mass General, there are some departments that can only take volunteers, and there's some departments that they have to pay, right, depending on the workplace. So it's a tricky conversation to be had. Yeah, Julie asked how much does the program cost? So I do want to share that there is a sticker cost when people do look to the Aspire internship program and other programs that we provide. We don't require a formal diagnosis to work with Aspire, so that's the difference where we don't take insurance, unfortunately, but we do have financial aid available. So our gala that I mentioned, we raise a lot of money each year so that programs and participants that can't afford our programming, we never want to defer someone away that can't afford it. So the internship program costs about $2,600 for a 10-week internship program, but a lot of the work starts beforehand with the kind of resume work, the interview prep, conversations about opportunities that we're looking into, and then the weekly coaching, consultation, and then supervisor and kind of seminar component as well. So there's kind of a lot encompassed within that 10-week program, and it does go beyond the scope of that 10 weeks beforehand and after. Other questions I have. And if you want to reach out to me afterwards, I'll make sure that you have my email as well, just so that, Maxim can share that with you. If people do have further questions that they want to ask about, or if interest in talking further, I'm always happy to do a follow-up call, either by phone, in person, or Zoom, whatever is the easiest. Yeah, so John asked, my son just turned 22. Do internships lead to full-time employment, or should I expect his work life to be temporary positions? So with the internship program, we do not guarantee permanent work. But if that is a goal of someone that's in the internship program or does career coaching with us, I mentioned it at the beginning, I will make sure that, we talk about all the slides that are here, but we do career coaching outside of the internship program as well, which is a separate individualized service. So people that may be looking for more full-time or permanent work, we do offer individual coaching services at 25 or 50 minutes, where the goal is really finding that long-term permanent work. And we do have employer partners that we partner with that could take those individuals on. So that's a great question. And thank you, Maxime, for answering that. Other questions? Emily wrote that many individuals or adults today that are neurodivergent, may not have access to mental health care diagnosis. For example, they may have autism but don't know because they can't get diagnosed. Many of the features you included are great for best practices in many university design workplace that works for everyone, no matter what they bring to the workplace. Excellent. There is no age limit, Kai, right? So I work with individuals all 18 plus. So my program is all for adults. So you could be fresh out of high school, in college. I would say the majority of the the participants that I work with are between 18 and 40 a lot of times, but I have worked with individuals in their 50s and 60s too. So there is no age limit. And I would say a lot of times if someone's in that upper age category, I typically do career coaching with them for more of a comfortability standpoint rather than being involved in an internship program, just because a lot of times those are those 18 to 30, 40-year-olds. Thank you, Rachel. Other questions that people may have. And if you're more comfortable asking afterwards in a personal email, I completely understand as well.
Okay, you going once, going twice. Oh, okay.
Yes, and like Maxim said, the slides will be shared afterwards. They'll be in a PDF version just because I can't share the actual PowerPoint, but I will share these with everyone afterwards as well as some other graphics that you can share. So happy to provide as much context or information or people to have as possible. So thank you all for joining today. I really appreciate it.
And thank you, Jack, and thank you, everyone. Have a great day. And by the end of today, I'll send all these materials to you.
Excellent.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.